Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today embodies diverse facets of creativity. He was born Sampuran Singh. He grew up to be a filmmaker, a scriptwriter, a poet, short story writer. He plays the sitar. He has won more than 5 national awards, 17 Filmfare trophies, a Sahitya Academy Award. Yesterday he was awarded the Padma Bhushan. A man indeed of many parts. I'm delighted to welcome Gulzar Saab.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
These many facets of your creativity, how do they coexist for you?
Actually, you have added a little too much. Otherwise, one does all these things in a normal life also. One listens to music, one listens to bhajans at home, and one looks into paintings.
You play the sitar. You have got a Sahitya Academy Award as for your writing. You have scripted more than 60 odd films. You have directed 17 odd. So
partly because it's a profession with me, I had to take up to some profession or the other. And filmmaking, of course, embodies the writing part also. That's why. Rest are much are out of curiosity also, and to know and to start conversing with music and start conversing with the paintings and colors, and they all fall a part of one, or rather I should say one form of art merges into the other and the other into another. I mean, poetry has colors and colors have poetry in them. So I think that's how it is.
So for someone who embodies so many facets of creative expression, what is that creative impulse for you? Is it, you use the word conversation, is it conversation, is it catharsis, is it the need to understand or to give it form and order and structure? What is the impulse?
It's like this. I don't think I can really define it for finality, with finality. Just as you can't define life with finality, one can't say exactly what is that makes you write or makes you sing or makes you play sitar. But it's just being aware of your own self, what is happening to you, the life which keeps on brushing you all the time. And few moments they stay back with you, the rest passes by. I think it is an urge to express that moment, how you reacted to it, which includes your environment, which includes your social relationships and personal relationships, and everything included. I mean, that's how you live your life, isn't it? And I think it's just how life brushes it, and where and when. If one's antennas are open, one has to be aware of oneself.
But this process of awareness of self then gets translated into a process of communication.
That's
communication has to be received.
That's
and obviously in each of these forms, the reception is of a different kind.
That's right.
You know, film is as much industrial product as it is personal self-expression. So have you had trouble reconciling these two dimensions?
I think first of all I agree with you with this expression, that it's finally when you try to express yourself, it is the communication, because you're trying to communicate to another person than yourself. And every medium has its own limitations also, and its advantages also. Film, of course, being a very commercial medium, you have to take care of how to talk to masses, how to talk to a big group of people, 500 people sitting in a dark room and you're talking to them. Have you been able to convey it to them or not? But then you are aware that you want to convey what you have felt and not what they are looking for. And if you can create that communication, I think that's the success of your own expression. And that's why I never blame the audience. It's not their failure, it is the failure of the maker always.
You know, at this stage of your success and creativity, you're probably able to, you know, sort of dictate and decide what is it that you want to say it and say it, bringing to bear all your talents and internal processes. But that may not always have been the case. You know, when you're writing a script as a producer, he wants to make the film sell and then to make it work. So to what degree have you felt, say, let's start with as a writer, independent in the process of writing the scripts that you write for film?
Very While you're trying to communicate, there's no dictation as such, but you feel few things which you can't share with them as a mass, and which you want to share only with, communicate to your own other self. That's where poetry comes in. Poetry is personal also, and yet you are relating it to others. I mean, you do publish your poems. So, but it's completely yourself. I mean, that's the advantage in poetry, or writing poetry or writing literature, because there's nothing else involved. Nobody else is involved in it. That's why I always feel the sunset which I have picturized in a film is not as complete as my sunset in the poem, because that's totally personal exactly, and I don't have to change a lens for it. I don't have to tell the cameraman which angle to exactly as you have felt it. So that becomes a self-expression. At times other mediums come to your help. You want to express a color which you do describe and or do make people feel it, or put it across, and that's where painting or film comes in. I think it is just an urge and a compulsion that happens inside you that you're trying to communicate.
Do you find that some forms are more appropriate to particular feelings that you want to communicate and express?
I think so.
So
I think so.
What kind
exactly
of
as I said, I just took this analogy on this example of a sunset. I may not be able to totally express myself in the film how I felt about a sunset, unless some words come in. And the moment words come in, it becomes literature. Then it's another part of. It's not only an image. It's not only a visual. There's something else also. So sometimes single form of art, sometimes two, and sometimes more than two also. And film, of course, includes more than 7 arts, 7, 8 arts in it.
In fact, your fiction has, in your writing, and I have to confess I've only had a limited exposure to it, has an enormous quality of brevity. You seem to use words with great restraint.
I'm not conscious of it, but I think you're right. It is there. I've not consciously made an effort to do that. But few things unsaid say much more. And by saying it, actually you limit it, because you start drawing a boundary. When you speak of an abstract expression to something, I can't often give you an example. But the moment you say more, you have drawn a boundary of your imagination. So I think I limit the imagination of my reader or the onlooker also. Whereas if I say less, I leave it to the imagination of the other person, so that the other person can also identify with it. And that happens in poetry. But you can analyze all this only after doing it, not that you think of this and then write.
Well, I'm afraid that this exchange is circumscribed by words and by conversation, but we'll be right back after a short break. Please don't go away.
सीआरबी महंगा तेल क्यों डालते हो यार?
ओए इंजन रिपेयर के निकाल 1000
हजार ये दुखी राम की बेकार में डालता है महंगा तेल।
उस्ताद आपका ट्रक का हो गया फेल।
सीआरबी नहीं डालोगे तो महंगा पड़ेगा।
नहीं डालोगे तो महंगा पड़ेगा।
एक एक सफेद बाल न छांटो। पेश है शैम्पू बेस्ड गोदरेज पाउडर हेयर डाई। बस काटो, घोलो और लगा लो। हर सफेद बाल काला बना लो। शैम्पू बेस्ड गोदरेज पाउडर हेयर डाई।
रिलैक्सो पहनो और जीतो। रिलैक्सो पहनो, कार्ड स्क्रैच करो और हर महीने शानदार इनाम जीतो। ट्रिप सिंगापुर के, मोटरसाइकिल, फ्रिज, टीवी और लाखों अन्य इनाम। जल्दी कीजिए, ऑफर सिर्फ स्टॉक रहने तक सीमित।
रिलैक्सो पहनो और जीतो। मैक्सिमा घड़ियां इतनी सही कि वक्त भी उनका पाबंद है. Maxima, perfect timing.
Welcome back to my continuing conversation with what I feel as the embodiment of creativity, Gulzar Saab. How did Sampuran Singh become Gulzar? What is the story?
Gulzar is a pen name which I took up. And with all addition and subtraction in life, I think I'm left only with that one name, Gulzar, and I like being called Gulzar and like being written and identified only as Gulzar. It doesn't define any promise, any caste, any religion, anything. I think just Gulzar makes me more comfortable because I think that's complete by itself.
Was there an impulse that, as a lot of people have when they start writing or start doing creative work, at the need for anonymity or a more, as you said, a neutral name which didn't reflect your background?
I mean, that all this you think much later that it, how does your name work or something. Not that one started at the school level, started writing at that. So I was saying it. I try to speak in Hindi sometimes.
Oh, please.
Sometimes I felt that उस वक्त इतना बड़ा horizon is not open in front. You start traveling and then you start seeing the horizon, after horizon. So I started just as Bathbazi, you know what it is. Bathbazi is Antakshri. We used to have that in school. And I used to mug up couplets to make a reply on ch, or ba, or bha. And those couplets which I used to mug up, they remained with me somewhere. I started understanding them. Not for sheer words, or not for a sheer reply of Antakshari. And when poetry starts staying with you, it starts expanding. It doesn't stay down in you only as couplets or words. Its meaning starts flowering out. And I think that's what started fascinating me. And the first book or first poem, which I should say, or first time a book made an impression on me from where when I look back, I think I turned to poetry from there, was Tagore. I read Tagore's translation in one of his books called Gardener. And the poem I still remember, his name was Mali. Somehow, somewhere, I don't know what moment it is, but when I look back, I think perhaps that was the turning point for me.
So was there a sort of an influence that was in some ways decisive of the Bengal heritage in some ways?
I think so. I think so, because after that incident in my school time, in my school age, I started looking for more books of Tagore, which brought me to Sharat Chandra, which brought me to other Bengali authors, and that stayed with me for a long time. And I think that's why I'm more of a Bengali even today.
What draws you to that culture and that sensibility?
I really can't define it in so many words, but the literature brought the culture of Bengal with it, and the sensitivity along with it, and the emotional expression which first, not that it doesn't exist in other languages, it does in other languages also, but in Bengali literature. One particular element which I think, which has remained in my writing also, is the nostalgia, which I think Bengali literature is full of it.
It's not just in your writing, it's also sort of in your film and in much of your work. It translates to this, to the use of flashback, of in some ways juxtaposing the past with the present.
That's right. I think it has become a way of narrating a story for me. And you're right that it works in that flashback, the nostalgia, remembering things in the past and how the past works. And no present is without a past behind it. Not even crying for mother is not without a past behind it. I mean, you cry knowing the kindness and the love from the mother. That's why you cry for it when you lose your mother. So I think every moment, everything has a past behind it. That remains a fact. But once again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, that it's not a thought out plan. I have also to study myself as much as you are trying to explain me to me. So I see that it has become a way of narration for me. When I start talking or when I start narrating, flashbacks come natural to me.
But is that sense of nostalgia inherently pleasant and pleasurable? Because, you know, the philosophies tell you we ought, you know, the need and the imperative to live in the present. And in some ways, you know, the past is seen as baggage. But you see it as illuminating, as inspiring, as liberating, as what?
Past is, I wouldn't agree it's a baggage really, but past is the one that's your punji also. That's your capital on which you build up your present towards the future. Because if you don't have that capital, I don't know how would you take a step further if you don't carry it with you. So I won't cut it out like that. And there is an element of sadness, there is an element of tragedy in it, there is an element. But then that's always much more poetic and much more charming. Even in personal life, while sitting or while talking at home among brothers, sisters, you always start talking of when I was in school or when I was a little, or when the sister tells you when you were small you used to do like this. And past is something that you start enjoying once again. In present, there's nothing but you're walking, you're trotting on. Future is fascination of imagination. I mean, you don't know what will happen, but one tries to imagine that.
So what do
the
you...
present that way remains only very drab. Come to think of it, you're just walking.
So what do you imagine in terms of a future for yourself? What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now?
I don't think I have any plans in personal life which I can talk of my future. But I do think of the future, for example, in science fiction. For example, cosmos fascinates me a lot. And cosmos appears a lot in my poetry, particularly the recent poetry. And now, since we have found the 10th planet, Sedna, so I'm still looking forward to know a little more about Sedna. So that's the new planet which we have found recently. So future is that sort of a study, or what it will be like, the way, and particularly in field of communication. So it's more of an imagination and fascination that will come. But that's because of the past which I have.
Well, we'll come right back and talk about the future with Gulzar Saab. Don't go away.
सिर्फ रिलायंस अपने 60,000 किलोमीटर फाइबर ऑप्टिक नेटवर्क के जरिए आपको देती है भारत भर में अटूट कॉल कनेक्ट, बिना किसी बाधा के। ज्यादा स्पष्ट आवाज, ज्यादा कवरेज, ज्यादा किफायती दरों पर। रिलायंस इंडिया मोबाइल, कर लो दुनिया मुट्ठी में।
वो देखो, रामू चाचा का घर उड़ गया। देखो देखो, मुखिया जी का भी घर उड़ गया।
अरे छोरा, सबका घर उड़ता है, पर थारो घर क्यों नहीं उड़ता रे?
जब से जेके लक्ष्मी सीमेंट से घर बनाया है, सब लोग यहीं चले आते हैं।
जेके लक्ष्मी सीमेंट, मजबूती गारंटीड।
पर वो नहीं आती। तुम बापू कहाँ हैं?
वो तो उड़ गए।
अब 3 सिंथॉल लाइम फ्रेश या स्किन फ्रेश के साथ एक सिंथॉल साबुन बिल्कुल फ्री।
मेरी स्पीड तो सब जानते हैं, लेकिन क्या आपको टीबी की स्पीड का पता है? हर मिनट एक आदमी टीबी से मरता है, पर इसका इलाज है डॉट्स। पक्के इलाज का पक्का वादा।
पक्के इलाज का पक्का वादा डॉट्स। ये सुविधाएं आपके नजदीकी स्वास्थ्य केंद्र में मुफ्त उपलब्ध हैं।
Welcome back to my continuing conversation with Gulzar Saab. We were talking about the cosmos and the future and sort of an expansive, eternal, growing future. When you refer to that. But coming down to sort of your use of poetry to project this, to reach out into the future. Can you give us an example or a sample? You have to translate it too.
But that's because my listeners must have realized by now how bad I am in English.
Well, and how bad I am in Hindi.
Since you have put me in this limitation of English, so I पूरी तरह से express नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ, लेकिन the same time जैसे मैं, for example, there's a poem. I know this dwarf sun of our galaxy. It's called dwarf sun. बोना सूरज कहा जाता है इसे, ड्वार्फ सन. साइंस में एक्चुअली, फिक्शन में नाम यही है, साइंस में नाम यही है इसका, हमारे सूरज का. तो ये कहीं ना कहीं आकर ये बुझ जाने वाला है. And I think of that time. लेकिन a poet's hope continues. और ये थोड़े से करोड़ों सालों में सूरज की आग बुझेगी जब. अब थोड़े से a few billions of years I couldn't express without saying थोड़े से करोड़ों सालों में सूरज की आग बुझेगी जब. और जब कोई ज़मीन उभरेगी, जब कोई चांद निकलेगा और राख उड़ेगी चारों तरफ मध्यम खाकिस्तरी रोशनी में, that murky darkness में, और एक जले कोयले की तरह एक टुकड़ा ये ज़मीन का भटकेगा.
This is quite a desolate kind of image of the future.
मैं सोचता हूँ उस वक्त अगर कागज पे लिखी एक नज्म कहीं उड़ते उड़ते सूरज में गिरे और भाग सूरज फिर से जलने लगे. So I am hoping कि शायद कोई किसी पेपर पे लिखी हुई some poem which is flying around astray and may fall into the sun and sun may start burning once again. So the poet's hope doesn't end with that scientific prediction. So this is what.
So is there sort of implicit in that is sort of an aspiration in some sense for immortality, for eternity? So what do you see? Do you see yourself reincarnating? Do you see yourself in the next life?
No, not in those very terms, reincarnation. But that's a fact that I mean that's when we say Carl Sagan, for example, explains the Nataraja in his book called Cosmos. And it's very interesting that we are not aware of all those symbols of Nataraja, which Carl Sagan all the way explained it for us from NASA. And when he says that life will be reborn, the Hindu religion or Hindu philosophy tells us about this. And he says there's a little mistake when taking it. It's not Gopal Das which died Gopal Das will be born. He means the cell of life will not finish on this globe, on this earth, on this planet called Earth. So, and it will continue from one planet to another, or another planet. But the process of life is eternal. That will not. So when you say of Avagaman doesn't mean that I will die and I will be born again. It only means that even if entire life comes to an end on this planet, it will be reborn because the cell will not die. So that's what it leads to.
In your writing, in your persona, in your work, in your image, you have so embodied the notion of love, of romantic love in some ways. How important has that continued to be for you as an emotion to cherish, to nurture in perhaps positive and affirmative ways, not just the lack of it, but in terms of its blossoming?
Ma'am, I'm eternally and permanently and in love with this species called human being, which is very interesting. Now, I don't, when I say I'm in love all the time, I don't mean a girl, and I don't mean so it is this species of human being which is very beautiful. The way it reacts on different moments differently. And I think that's the charm of life, isn't it? that you can't predict life. It is so spontaneous. It keeps on happening. Everything keeps on happening, and that's the most beautiful part. And that's knowing that you're going to end this life. This life is going to end one day. You still live with all its intensity and its charm, only because of the unpredictability of life. Isn't it charming by itself? So that's what I'm in love with. And that's why you love human beings. That's you love another human being. Rest is biological. But this is what it is. And that's knowing life. And that's fascinating. And that's what makes you write. That's what makes you sing. That's what makes you make films. That's what makes you keep sharing.
In much of your articulation, you have also talked about how important music is. You've talked about color and many facets of it. You know, sort of you use the rhythms of music in many ways in the film that you do. You know, the quality of alliteration, of intonation, and the poetry that you write. You also play the sitar every morning. So Meghna, your daughter tells us in the book.
I could not continue till a friend of mine, the famous singer Bhupi, he told me, if you want to continue sitar further, you have to start singing, learn vocal. And बस वहाँ से डर गया था मैं, नहीं ये तो गड़बड़ हो गई. लेकिन all the same, I'm fond of that particular instrument, and you will see it appears in my music and in the film again and again. And as far as music is concerned, I think it's in even the chanting of shloka, the azan, it's very musical. It's a very, very musical. I mean, that's why it has come down in the centuries to us. And, music exists all around you if you are aware. Even the silent halo that appears early in the morning before dawn, it's very musical. Music, I think, is a little more, writing is perhaps a little easier art than music, because you have 7 स्वर हैं आपके पास, या 12 कह लीजिए, ध्वनि कोमल तीव्र मिला के साथ में, लेकिन to converse within only those 12 sounds and then express yourself,
gamut of emotions.
I think it's a very big thing. I think music is much bigger an art and more difficult, and that's why I couldn't do it.
Well, you know, you've talked about, you know, we talked about the cosmos and what takes rebirth and the processes, and you're far from it. But do you think about death? Do you fear death?
Not exactly. Not exactly as we know death. Otherwise, it's a very lyrical thing. And I think Tagore, once again, he made death so lyrical in his poems. If you have seen my film called, not my film, sorry, it is Rishida's film, I have only written it. In that song, there's a poem in it when Anand dies, and Rishida had asked me, I need a poem here. And एक नज़्म का वादा है मिलेगी मुझसे, so न धूप हो न छाँव हो, और that poem की इस कविता का वादा है जो मुझे मिलने वाली है. That कविता is death. That's how I look at that thought.
You used this image when you were giving us this poem, of, you know, this image of the future, of this poem that's written and that falls into the sun, and then the sun gets light again. So, what would you like the future, you to be remembered as that poet who wrote that poem that went and relit the sun?
No, I mean, just remember me. I think just remember me. Just remember me, or if I am capable to remind you of myself. But I think the dominant part remains of a poet. But not that I want to dictate anything, remember me. I have not even worked towards that. But I am, with all my relationships, like, I should put it like this, in a family, you are a brother, you are a father, you are a son, you're a husband, And all those relations you live together, not separately. My relation with the society and my relation with all that I do, whether I write poetry or write films, or it all belongs to me and I belong to all of them.
Well, we shall continue to celebrate that. Thank you very much.
Thank
this
you.
has been a great honor
Thank
and a
you.
great privilege. Thank you very much.
In Conversation was brought to you by Dabur Lal Toothpaste, Long Pudina Tomar, Taklifen Rakhe Dur.
Life with finality. One can't say exactly what is that makes you write or makes you sing or makes you play sitar. But it's just being aware of your own self, what is happening to you, the life which keeps on brushing you all the time. And few moments they stay back with you, the rest passes by. I think it is an urge to express that moment, how you reacted to it, which includes your environment, which includes your social relationships and personal relationships, and everything included into
But you
paintings.
you play the sitar, you have got a Sahitya Akademi Award as, for your writing, you have scripted more than 60 odd films, you have directed 17 odd. So
partly because it's a profession with me, I had to take up to some profession or the other. And filmmaking, of course, embodies the writing part also. That's why. Rest are much are out of curiosity also, and to know and to start conversing with music and start conversing with the paintings and colors, and they all fall a part of one, or rather I should say one form.
Mr. Sitar, he has won more than 5 national awards, 17 Filmfare trophies, a Sahitya Akademi Award. Yesterday he was awarded the Padma Bhushan. A man indeed of many parts. I'm delighted to welcome Gulzar Saab.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
These many facets of your creativity, how do they coexist for you?
Actually, you have added a little too much. Otherwise, one does all these things in a normal life also. One listens to music, one listens to bhajans at home, and one looks.
Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today embodies diverse facets of creativity. He was born Sampuran Singh. He grew up to be a filmmaker, a scriptwriter, a poet, short story writer. He played
form of art merges into the other and the other into another. I mean, poetry has colors and colors have poetry in them. So I think that's how it is.
So for someone who embodies so many facets of creative expression, what is that creative impulse for you? Is it, you use the word conversation, is it conversation, is it catharsis, is it the need to understand or to give it form and order and structure? What is the impulse?
It's like this, I don't think I can really define it for finality with finality. Just as you can't define